The evening air was filled with the comforting scent of roasted garlic as I laid the last fork on the table, a small smile playing on my lips. Mark would love the lasagna I spent the afternoon perfecting. It was a quiet Tuesday, just another ordinary day in our tidy Jacksonville suburb, where the biggest event was Mrs. Daly's cat stuck up the tree again. Just as I straightened the napkins, my phone vibrated against the kitchen counter, a sharp, unexpected interruption. Picking it up, I saw a message from an unknown number flash across the screen. "Do you know what your husband is doing right now?" it read. A chill ran down my spine, the vague question gnawing at me instantly. I shook my head, dismissing it as a wrong number or a silly prank. Moments later, I heard the front door open and close with a familiar creak, and the sound of Mark's cheerful whistle as he entered. "Smells incredible, babe," he called out, his voice echoing down the hall filled with our family photos. I forced a smile and met him in the foyer. "You're just in time for dinner. How was your day?" Mark wrapped his arms around me, planting a kiss on my forehead. "Busy as ever, but better now that I'm here." He was warm, present, and everything seemed just as it should be. We sat down to eat, the table set with our best dishes, as if to ward off the creeping doubts in my mind. Our conversation flowed easily, filled with Mark's office anecdotes and plans for the weekend. Yet beneath the laughter, my thoughts kept darting back to that message. Was I being naive? As Mark recounted a humorous encounter with his boss, I watched his expressions closely. There was a lightness in his demeanor. But was there also a trace of something else? Guilt? Secrecy? Or was I simply seeing shadows where there were none? The clatter of cutlery and the soft glow of the dining room light created an illusion of normalcy, but the seed of suspicion had already been planted. That night, as we cleaned up together and talked about mundane things like grocery lists and the weather, I felt a distance growing inside me. A gap filled with silent questions and unspoken fears. As we headed to bed, Mark kissed me goodnight, his eyes crinkling at the corners with genuine affection, or so I wanted to believe. Lying awake in the dark, I made a decision. I needed to find out the truth behind that message, not just for my peace of mind, but for the sake of our marriage. Little did I know, this choice would lead me down a path that would change everything. The next morning broke with a gray, overcast sky, mirroring the turmoil in my heart. I watched Mark leave for work, his usual kiss goodbye lingering a second longer, as if he sensed my unease. As soon as his car disappeared around the corner, the weight of the unknown pressed down on me, urging me into action. I started small, combing through our bank statements and credit card bills. Nothing stood out, just the mundane expenses of suburban life. Each receipt, each transaction felt like a breadcrumb leading nowhere. Frustration bubbled inside me as I sifted through emails and browser histories, only to find the benign detritus of daily life. It was mid-morning when I found myself at the local coffee shop, staring blankly at a frothy cappuccino. Tina, the barista with an easy smile and quicker wit, slid across the counter to refill my cup. "You look like you lost your best friend," she remarked, her brows knitting together in concern. I chuckled weakly, the sound hollow in my ears. "Just one of those days," I murmured, stirring my coffee mechanically. "Want to talk about it? Sometimes it helps, you know," Tina offered, her voice low and inviting. The sincerity in her eyes nudged at my resolve, and I found myself spilling my fears between sips of coffee. Tina listened, her face a mask of sympathy. "That's rough, Laura. Have you thought about getting some professional help?" she suggested cautiously, her voice dropping to a whisper. A private detective? The idea had crossed my mind, dismissed as too dramatic, too desperate. But now, desperation felt like the only rational response. "Yeah, I might know a guy. Used to work with my brother. He's discreet, thorough. Want me to give you his contact?" Gratitude washed over me. "Yes, please, Tina. I'd appreciate that." Later that day, I met with Detective Jameson in the same coffee shop. His demeanor was calm, his eyes sharp beneath graying brows. He listened intently as I outlined my situation, nodding occasionally. jotting down notes in a weathered notebook. "So, you want to know if your husband is being unfaithful or if someone is playing games with you?" Jameson summarized, his voice neutral. "Yes, exactly." My voice was firmer than I felt. Jameson closed his notebook, his gaze steady. "I'll need access to whatever you can provide. Phone records, emails, social media. The more I have, the clearer the picture." I nodded, the reality of my decision settling in. "I'll get you everything you need." "Good. I'll start with what you've given me today. Let's keep in touch, and I'll update you with anything substantial." As I walked back to my car, the clouds seemed to part, a sliver of blue sky peeking through. It wasn't much, but it felt like a sign. With each step, I steeled myself against the uncertainty of what Jameson might find, determined to face whatever truths lay hidden, armed with the hope that honesty, no matter how painful, was the path to resolution. The days that followed were a blur of waiting and worry. Detective Jameson's investigation turned into a silent undercurrent in our daily life, unseen yet palpably present between Mark and me. I kept my unease hidden behind smiles and small talk, while Mark seemed oblivious, caught up in the routines that once spelled out normalcy for us. Jameson checked in regularly, his updates a mix of precise observations and inconclusive findings. "No signs of infidelity in his communications," he'd report. Or, "His work schedule checks out. No unusual meetings or absences." Each report should have reassured me, yet they built a scaffold of doubt that hung over me, shadowing even the brightest moments. One afternoon, Jameson's number flashed on my screen, a call I took in the quiet of our backyard, watching autumn leaves drift to the ground. "Laura, we need to meet." His voice was serious, prompting a swirl of butterflies in my stomach. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice tight with tension. "It's best we discuss this in person. Can you meet at the park in an hour?" I agreed, anxiety threading through me as I drove to our designated meeting spot, a secluded bench by the lake where families often fed the ducks. Jameson was already there, his figure solitary against the backdrop of rippling water. "Thank you for coming, Laura." He greeted me with a nod, his expression unreadable. "What's going on, Jameson? What did you find?" I braced myself for the worst. He sighed, his gaze fixed on the distant water. "It's peculiar," he began. "Your husband's actions don't suggest an affair. However, there are patterns that are unusual." "Like what?" I pressed, needing to grasp something tangible. "He's been frequenting a location regularly, always the same cafe, always around the same time, and always alone. No meetings, just him and a coffee for about an hour." A chill ran down my spine. "Did you confront him there?" "Not yet," Jameson admitted. "It doesn't make sense as a venue for an affair. It's too open, too casual. But I did overhear him once, talking to someone over the phone. He mentioned something about making her understand and needing to be sure." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Making me understand? Understanding what?" "That's what we need to figure out," Jameson said, his voice low. "This could be a misunderstanding, Laura, or something deeper. I suggest we observe a little longer, see what this routine is about." Nodding, I felt the complexity of my own feelings. Relief mixed with renewed suspicion. "Okay, keep watching. I need to know the full truth no matter what it is." As I drove home, the world around me felt disjointed, like a puzzle whose pieces were familiar yet didn't quite fit together. The possibility of innocence tangled with hints of secrets, leaving me to wonder about the foundations of trust and the shadows they cast in our hearts. The following weeks felt stretched thin, marked by strained smiles and conversations that skated over the surface of our deeper troubles. Mark was oblivious to the storm brewing within me, or so I thought. With each passing day, the gap between us widened, a gulf filled with my silent questions and his unknowing cheer. One chilly evening, as we settled into the soft glow of our living room with cups of tea warming our hands, I decided it was time to breach the silence. "Mark, we need to talk," I began, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. He looked up, his brow furrowing slightly. "Sure, what's up?" "It's about us," I said, pausing to gather my courage. Lately, I've felt distant from you, like there's something between us. Haven't you felt it too? Mark set his cup down, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. Laura, if this is about my late nights, I swear they're just because of the project deadline at work. It's not just the late nights, I countered, feeling the weight of the unspoken hanging between us. It's the messages I've been getting about you. His confusion deepened. Messages? What messages? I took a deep breath, my resolve hardening. Messages hinting at things you might be hiding from me. I've tried to ignore them, hoping they were just mistakes or cruel jokes. But they've gotten into my head, Mark. I had to do something. Mark's face paled, his eyes widening as he processed my words. Laura, I don't understand. What are you saying? I hired a detective, Mark, to find out if there was any truth to the accusations. I confessed, watching him closely. A complex play of emotions crossed his face. Shock, hurt, perhaps a flicker of guilt. You did what? His voice was a mix of disbelief and pain. Yes, I continued. And he hasn't found anything definite yet. But there's enough odd behavior to keep looking. I need to know, Mark. Is there something you're not telling me? For a moment he was silent, looking down at his hands before meeting my gaze with a look I couldn't quite decipher. Laura, this is insane. You hired a detective because of some random messages? You think I'm cheating on you? Not think, I corrected softly. Fear. There's a difference. I feared it enough to need certainty, one way or another. Mark ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration and surrender. I can't believe this. Laura, the messages, they were from me. I stared at him, uncomprehending. From you? Why would you send me those? He looked away, his voice barely a whisper. I thought if you got them and nothing changed, it would mean you really trusted me, that no suspicion would enter your heart. It was stupid. I see that now. The revelation stunned me into silence. The mystery of the messages was solved, but it opened a deeper wound, one not easily healed. You tested me? Our marriage? I thought it would strengthen us, he admitted, his voice breaking. I never considered it would drive us to this brink. The room felt colder, the shadows longer. What was meant to strengthen had indeed tested us, but not in ways either of us had anticipated. As we sat there, the chasm between us both widened and deepened, filled now with the pain of betrayal and the daunting task of rebuilding trust from the ashes of good intentions gone awry. In the aftermath of Mark's confession, our home became a quiet battleground of emotions. The days rolled into each other, each one marked by tentative gestures and conversations that tiptoed around our raw edges. As the shock of his admission faded, a deep, unsettling need to understand why filled its place. One brisk morning, I found Mark in the kitchen, the early light casting long shadows across the floor. He was making coffee, a routine that had always comforted him. I leaned against the doorway, watching him for a moment before speaking. Can we talk? I asked, my voice softer than I felt inside. He didn't turn, but his shoulders tensed. Of course, he replied, his tone cautious. I walked over and sat at the kitchen table, the place where we'd shared countless meals and laughter, now a silent witness to our strain. Mark, why did you feel you needed to test our trust like that? What made you doubt us? He sighed, a long, weary exhale, and finally turned to face me, leaning back against the counter. I guess it was my own insecurities. He began slowly, choosing his words with care. When I got promoted last year, things changed. There were expectations, pressures. I felt like I was losing grip on things, even us. I listened, the bitterness inside me softening a bit with understanding. But why not just talk to me? Why resort to something so destructive? He shook his head, a mixture of regret and sorrow in his eyes. I thought if you doubted me and we still stood strong, it meant our foundation was solid. It was foolish, Laura. I see that now. I nodded, digesting his words, the gap between us filled with the painful realization of how fragile trust could be. "What do we do now?" I asked, the enormity of our situation settling around us. Mark moved to sit opposite me, his eyes never leaving mine. "I want to fix this if you're willing. Whatever it takes. Counseling, time, transparency. I'll do it all." The offer hung in the air, heavy and sincere. "I want that too," I admitted. "But it's going to take time, Mark. And effort. From both of us." He reached across the table, his hand open and waiting. Tentatively, I placed my hand in his, a small but significant bridge as we faced the uncertain road ahead. In the weeks that followed, we started counseling. Each session was a step, some forward, some back, but always together. We learned to communicate, really communicate, laying bare our fears and hopes. It was painful, cathartic, and sometimes deeply healing. As I reflect on our journey, sharing this story now feels like both a closure and a beacon for others. The mistakes we made were uniquely ours, but the lessons are universal. Trust, once broken, is not easily mended, but it's not impossible either. It requires honesty, vulnerability, and above all, a willingness to forgive and rebuild. As the last words of my story fade, I invite you, the listener, to reflect on your own relationships. Have you faced similar trials? How did you navigate them? Share your stories with us, and let's continue this conversation. Together we can find strength and understanding in the shared paths of our lives. Join us next time for another story from the heart. And remember, we're all in this together.